Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are, wrote Machiavelli, capturing a tension that quietly defines modern life and explains why so many people feel confused without knowing exactly why. Many individuals sense that confidence travels further than clarity, that certainty is rewarded more quickly than careful thought, and that visibility often matters more than understanding. This awareness usually remains unspoken, forming a background discomfort rather than a clear insight. People notice that some individuals rise rapidly while others, equally capable, remain overlooked, and the explanation offered rarely matches lived experience. The issue is not intelligence or effort, but the difference between how systems claim to work and how they actually reward behavior. This gap creates frustration because people are taught to build depth while environments reward display. Over time, participation slowly becomes performance, and performance becomes habit, shaping identity without conscious choice. This does not happen because people are dishonest or shallow, but because adaptation is human nature. When systems reinforce certain signals, those signals multiply. Machiavelli's insight was never about manipulation for its own sake, but about seeing power clearly, understanding that structures shape outcomes long before intentions matter. Thinking like Machiavelli in a psychological sense means observing patterns without hostility and recognizing that repeated outcomes are rarely accidental. This perspective does not strip away empathy, it removes illusion. Illusion creates confusion, and confusion creates emotional exhaustion. The quiet truth is that many people are not failing. They are measuring themselves by systems that reward something different than they were taught to value. And clarity begins the moment that difference is finally seen. The visible narrative society presents is reassuring and simple, telling people that success follows authenticity, positivity, and effort, and that recognition naturally reflects contribution and merit. This story appears in education, media, and workplace culture, encouraging individuals to focus on attitude, expression, and perseverance while trusting that systems are mostly fair. It offers comfort because it suggests control, implying that better outcomes come from better personal choices rather than deeper structural forces. This doesn't apply to all men or all women, and it isn't a moral judgment. It's a pattern created and amplified by modern social systems. In practice, what is praised publicly is often different from what is rewarded structurally. Speed tends to outperform depth, confidence outpaces accuracy, and visibility frequently matters more than consistency. These traits are easier to measure and amplify, especially in digital environments built around attention. People learn this quietly through feedback, not instruction, adapting their behavior to what receives response. Questioning this process can feel uncomfortable, even cynical, because it challenges comforting beliefs about fairness. As a result, many repeat the visible narrative even when personal experience contradicts it. The gap between promise and outcome becomes internalized as self-doubt rather than recognized as a systemic mismatch. Individuals begin adjusting themselves instead of examining incentives. Machiavellian thinking starts by separating the story society tells from the structure that quietly governs results. It asks not what should matter, but what consistently does. This shift removes unnecessary self-blame and replaces emotional reaction with observation. When the visible narrative is examined instead of accepted, confusion softens, clarity grows, and people regain the ability to see outcomes as patterns rather than personal verdicts. The blind spot in the dominant narrative is incentives, because most explanations focus on intention and character while ignoring what systems repeatedly reinforce. Without understanding incentives, repeated outcomes feel unfair or mysterious, leading people to personalize what is actually predictable. Behavior is often judged by language and presentation, even though rewards respond more reliably to alignment with structure. Familiarity becomes mistaken for competence, and repetition quietly replaces evaluation. Another blind spot is silence, because restraint and hesitation are often interpreted as weakness in environments that reward constant output. Systems designed for speed leave little room for reflection, encouraging people to perform certainty rather than develop understanding. Machiavelli observed that outcomes reveal truth more reliably than promises, and modern systems confirm this daily by amplifying what fits their design rather than what reflects depth. The blind spot persists because confronting it removes comforting beliefs about fairness and control. It requires acknowledging that many results are not moral judgments or reflections of worth. Without this awareness, people either idealize success or internalize struggle, both of which distort reality. Early success can feel like proof of superiority, while early difficulty feels like personal failure, even though both often reflect alignment or misalignment with incentives. Machiavellian clarity reframes these experiences as data rather than destiny. It shifts focus away from blame and toward structure. When incentives are seen clearly, emotional reactions soften and curiosity replaces resentment. People regain perspective by understanding that adaptation is human, not malicious, and that systems quietly shape behavior long before conscious intention enters the picture. Seeing the blind spot restores agency because structures can be navigated once they are understood. At the psychological level, modern systems operate through reward loops that link attention to dopamine, reinforcing behaviors that generate response and visibility. Validation strengthens repetition, while indifference quietly discourages behaviors that lack immediate payoff. Digital environments accelerate this process by delivering feedback instantly and publicly, compressing learning cycles and favoring surface-level signals over depth. Over time, people adapt without deliberate planning, shaping expression around what feels rewarding. Repetition distorts perception because ideas encountered frequently feel more accurate and familiar voices feel more trustworthy, regardless of substance. This is not deliberate manipulation, but a cognitive shortcut amplified by scale. Validation also shapes identity as people begin associating external approval with self-worth, narrowing curiosity and increasing risk avoidance. Machiavellian insight recognizes that power in such systems is structural, embedded in feedback mechanisms rather than held by individuals alone. Those who align with incentives gain influence, often unintentionally, while others fade regardless of depth. Understanding this removes the need for personal resentment, replacing it with clarity about conditioning. When reward is mistaken for truth, confusion follows, because attention feels like evidence and silence feels like rejection. Separating feedback from identity restores balance, allowing people to see attention as information rather than judgment. Psychological clarity emerges when individuals recognize that popularity signals system alignment, not inherent value. This awareness slows reaction, creates space for choice, and restores agency within environments designed to provoke constant response. Over time, systems that reward surface signals create long-term imbalance by shaping development unevenly. Early validation can delay self-examination because attention arrives without requiring depth, making reflection feel unnecessary. When conditions change, confusion emerges, as behaviors that once worked no longer produce the same results, and this shift feels personal rather than structural. Without internal grounding, adaptation becomes difficult. On the other side, those who receive little early validation may internalize invisibility as inadequacy, interpreting silence as failure instead of misalignment. Both experiences originate from the same system, one overexposed to feedback and the other underexposed, neither guided towards stable internal value. Expectations also become distorted as people seek consistency from environments designed for novelty and constant change. When attention fades, disappointment grows, and when recognition never arrives, discouragement deepens. Machiavellian clarity reframes early outcomes as alignment with temporary incentives rather than permanent judgments. This reframing reduces regret by transforming past experiences into information rather than verdicts. Long-term confusion often arises from tying identity too closely to system feedback, which shifts unpredictably. When people detach worth from unstable signals, growth becomes steadier and less reactive. Quiet development regains importance, patience becomes tolerable, and time feels like an ally rather than a threat. Understanding delayed consequences restores continuity, allowing individuals to move forward without constantly renegotiating self-worth in response to changing external rewards. The unintended trap of these systems is shared harm, because anxiety exists on all sides of the feedback loop. Those who receive attention fear losing it, while those without attention fear never gaining it, creating constant pressure to signal relevance and certainty. Exploration feels risky, and consistency becomes performance rather than stability. Trust erodes as adaptation replaces sincerity, making interactions feel transactional even without conscious intent. Moral confusion grows when visibility is mistaken for correctness, and silence is mistaken for weakness, discouraging thoughtful disagreement. Machiavellian analysis reveals that this trap is systemic rather than personal, designed by incentives rather than individuals. When people focus only on others, hostility increases, but when they recognize structure, understanding grows. The system externalizes responsibility by framing outcomes as personal success or failure while keeping incentives invisible. This prevents meaningful change and keeps participants reactive. Naming the trap reduces its power, turning confusion into comprehension. Comprehension slows urgency, widens perspective, and restores choice. People regain the ability to engage selectively rather than compulsively, deciding when to participate and when to step back. This is not withdrawal, but conscious involvement. Shared harm becomes shared responsibility, and responsibility begins with awareness rather than accusation. Seeing the trap clearly allows individuals to navigate imperfect systems without losing emotional balance or personal direction. The way out begins with awareness and agency, not rejection of society. For men, this means building internal value that does not depend on constant external feedback, focusing on skills, health, and self-respect that remain stable when systems fluctuate. Realistic expectations reduce resentment, and boundaries protect energy from environments that reward noise over substance. For women, awareness involves examining how validation shapes self-perception, recognizing that attention does not always reflect alignment or long-term fulfillment. Strengthening internal worth allows discernment about timing, depth, and meaningful investment. For both, realism is essential, understanding that systems reward certain behaviors rather than moral virtue, which prevents over-identification with unstable outcomes. Private measures of progress reduce dependence on public signals and allow growth to compound quietly. Observation becomes the core skill, noticing what is rewarded and what is ignored without immediate judgment. This is a pattern created and amplified by modern social systems, platforms, and incentives. Machiavellian thinking, applied psychologically, is not manipulation but clarity without hostility. Clarity reduces confusion, and reduced confusion restores calm. The goal is not to dominate systems or people, but to remain self-directed within them. When illusion fades, agency grows steadily, allowing individuals to stop chasing signals and start choosing direction. Outsmarting most people does not require cleverness, only the willingness to see clearly and act with patience, balance, and self-awareness over time.